Hey folks, today's brew session is going to start with creating a recipe completely from scratch. Now what I have here is my 2020 homebrew goals, the brew year's resolutions that I listed off at the beginning of January. And one of them was to create a Michigan themed beer. I want to create some beers that are inspired from some of the favorite places my wife and I like to go visit throughout Michigan. And I figured the easiest to start with was Tahquamenon Falls in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Tahquamenon Falls has a rich amber coppery color to it, very distinct. So I figure that lends itself well to doing an amber ale, of course. So before I start just throwing ingredients together, I wanted to start with some basic characteristics of what this beer should be. And of course, first is the color, the rich amber copper color. Now how Tahquamenon Falls in the river gets that color is that it flows through a cedar forest, and the tannins from those cedar trees leach into the water and give it that distinctive color. Now, as far as flavor compounds, the last thing I want to write down is tannin, because that has negative connotations when it comes to making beer. But I do want kind of a rich, earthy flavor characteristic. Slightly cedary or pine-like. Now you could go crazy and make a list a page long of characteristics that you want to achieve in your beer when you're designing a recipe. But I'm going to leave it at color, which I'm going to try to achieve through my grain bill and my specialty grains, and the rich, earthy, cedary or pine-like characteristic, which I'm probably certain I'm going to have to rely on my yeast to achieve. So let's start with this. All right, I'm in Beersmith 3, and as you can see, I've got some templates set up here. These are recipe templates, each built around a certain equipment profile that I have saved and created. I'm going to use the 2.5 gallon brew in a bag template, and I'm going to make a copy of this. Control C, Control V, paste it, and I'm going to work on the copy so I don't mess up my original. So I'm going to change the boil time to 30 minutes. And you can change your equipment profile here in the recipe, and it's not going to change your equipment profile in the main program. It will only change it here in this recipe. So there are 30 minutes. I'm going to set a date. Today's the 6th. I believe Amber Ale is already the default style. You can change that depending on what you're making. I'm going to change the mash profile to 154 degrees just to add myself a little body to this beer. I don't want a 2-stage fermentation. I just want single stage. And I'm using carb tabs or carb drops instead of corn sugar, but they don't have those listed, so I'm just going to stick with the corn sugar. You can add your own ingredients and profiles and all kinds of things in Beersmith. It's quite robust. Okay, you might think that when you're building a recipe from scratch, you would start with your base malt, but not necessarily so. I want to start with the color. That is the identifying characteristic that will match this beer to the color of Tahquamenon Falls. That's going to be the key identifier. So I'm going to start with specialty malts that will hopefully get me the color that I want. And the first one will be Crystal. I don't like to go much higher than 60. I could try 80 Lovabond on this one, but I'm going to go with 60 first. And I'm going to go with the generic here rather than the Thomas Fawcett or the Muntons, just in case they're out of those particular brands or they don't have it at the homebrew store when I go to shop for my ingredients. And I'm going to start with, I don't know, half a pound. I'm just picking random numbers right now. And that gives me a color that's too pale. I need something darker. So let's try some chocolate. And again, there is a generic one, but that's from the United Kingdom. I want to keep this chocolate rye malt. That might be interesting. But I'm going to keep this all U.S. ingredients because this is a Michigan-themed beer. And just out of the blue, I'm going to pick a random number, small random number. And yeah, that's close. That's close. I could tweak this for an hour maybe, but I'll stop there and add my base malt now. Let's see, what do I have on hand? I have Maris Otter on hand, and I also have Brice Brewer's malt, and I'll pick that. Might as well use something I have on hand. 5 pounds. It's a small batch, and that's not bad. It's not bad at all. The estimated original gravity is a little high. I mean, it's within specifications. So let's knock this down to about 4.5 pounds. Still got my color. And it's 10.49. I was really hoping for something around 10.50. So I'm happy with that. So next I want to select some hops. And I said I had a couple of choices off the top of my head to give me that earthy character that I'm looking for. Fuggles and Goldings and Willamette. Well, Fuggles and Goldings are both UK brand hops. And I want to stick with the US varieties. So I'm going to choose that one. And I'm going to do like half an ounce. My boil is only 30 minutes. Let's see where I am on bitterness. 15.6, and that's low. It should be somewhere between 20 and 40 IBUs for this style. So I'm going to add some more. And this time I'm going to add another half ounce at 5 minutes, right? Maybe 10, 5, 5. And now my IBUs are 19.7, getting better. I am going to try a whole ounce up here. And I'm still within the sweet zone, but I'm on the high end of the sweet zone. And for this first batch, this test batch, I'd like to stay kind of middle of the road. So I'm going to drop this down to 3/4 of an ounce. And that gives me 27.5. That's not too bad. And I'll leave the aroma and flavor hops at half an ounce. So there's the hops. All right, the last thing to add is yeast. And since this is a 2.5 gallon batch, I'm not going to waste half a package of liquid yeast. I'm going to pick some dry yeast, and US-05 sounds like a good place to start. And there we go. This is it. Now all that's left to do is to go pick up the ingredients and make it. So I finally got to the homebrew store and picked up the grains that I need for my 2.5 gallon batch of Tahquamenon Amber Ale. No, that's not all of them. These are just the specialty grains. I already had some Turo in stock, So I'm going to use 8.5 pounds of 2-row along with this. Alright, so I had the strike water heating up in the kitchen while I was outside measuring and grinding grain. I'm looking for a strike temperature of 158 degrees. Wow, I'm at 160. It's a little high. Alright, I'm going to take a temperature reading to see how badly I missed it. And I wasn't expecting to be low, I was expecting to be high. But this says 148, 149. So, I'm going to turn the heat on. If I can bring this up to where I want it. Alright, it's bouncing from 153.6 to 154. I'm going to turn the heat off. Put the lid on. And start my 30-minute brew day timer. Alright, the mash timer went off. 30 minutes was all we mashed for. Turn the heat on. Get ready to boil. Lift up the brew in a bag. Make sure I'm not dripping on the stove, and just let that drain while the wort heats up to boil. Alright, I squeezed the bag, got all the wort in the boil kettle, still waiting for it to come up to a boil. And I'm going to take my post-mash / pre-boil gravity reading. I'm looking for a pre-boil gravity of about 1048. I did some playing around on the Beersmith tools, the refractometer tool, and I should be between 12 and 13, and I'm between 13 and 14, about 13 and a half bricks. Let me go convert that into gravity points and see how high I really am on my pre-boil gravity. It's going to be a stronger beer than I planned. You know, when I was milling those grains, I thought, man, that's a lot of base malt. 8.5 pounds is what the recipe says, right? Unless I read that wrong.
Oh no!
I did. Holy crap. You know what I did? I doubled the amount of base malt. I put 8.5 pounds instead of 4.5.
Nope!
Alright, so here's the deal. I'm throwing in the towel on this batch of beer. I've pitched the wort already. I'm just not going to mess with it. I don't want to make a super strong amber ale. I want to make it the way I designed it. And I don't want to waste my hops. I don't want to waste my yeast on a batch that may or may not come out if I split it. So live and learn. I would rather lose a little time and a little bit of grain than grain, hops, yeast, everything. So this batch is a big old fail, and I'll go back to the homebrew store and I'll buy new ingredients, new grains, and try it again the way it's supposed to be. Read the recipe, follow the recipe, check your measurements, and don't do what I just did.